Starting with Streets offline, the average FPS was actually lower with turbo mode on. It was at 158 versus 165 with turbo mode off. That's about a 4% decrease. On the other hand, though, the lows told a different story. 1% lows jumped from 125 to 135, and 0.1% lows from 111 to 122. So even though the top end dipped slightly, the frame pacing felt smoother overall. In Streets Online, the average FPS stayed nearly identical, 133 versus 134, basically within margin of error, but the lows improved again. 1% lows were up about 5% from 96 to 101, and 0.1% lows from 82 to 91, which is a solid 10% gain. On Customs Offline, Turbo Mode had a slightly lower average FPS again, 245 versus 248, but it's basically a negligible difference. The 1% lows, however, climbed from 176 to 186, and 0.1% lows jumped from 137 to 159. That's a pretty massive 16% gain there, just from changing one setting. That's the kind of uplift that decreases micro stutters and makes gunfights feel snappier. And finally, in Customs Online, this was the cleanest win for Turbo Mode. Average FPS was the same at 224, but lows were consistently better. 1% lows rose from 145 to 160, and 0.1% lows from 119 to 131. Another 10% improvement in the bottom 0.1%. This really helps smooth out those dips when you move into different areas with a lot of assets, or when new AI is loading in. So given all this, should you enable X3D Turbo Mode on your X3D chip? When it comes to the average FPS, the difference is basically a wash. With Turbo Mode, the average FPS was either the same or slightly lower usually, but never meaningfully so. It's all well within the margin of error for a game like Tarkov that already has a ton of RNG. The real takeaway here is in the lows. Across every test, 1% lows improved by about 5 to 10%, and 0.1% lows were up by about 10 to 15%. That translates directly into better frame pacing, and that means smoother, more consistent gameplay. Even though gameplay with turbo mode off was already solid, turning it on helped eliminate those little dips that happen when you're moving through different areas that can throw off the feel during fights or when you're turning quickly. So yeah, for Tarkov, I'd say it's worth flipping that switch, absolutely.